brief welcome because even with one guest short, I think we have quite a lot of ground to cover today. But welcome, everybody. It's great to have you with us. And I'm going to hand over to Philippa Beale, who's going to introduce our guest today and look after the session. But I will be here and I will be in the background and controlling the screen and all of that. But it's lovely to see you all. And Philippa, it's over to you.
Hello, everyone. Well, my name is Philippa Beale, and for the last 3 years, I have been organising exhibitions and events about a sense of place. We hear a lot in the news about people thinking they shouldn't be allowed to come into England, or we don't want immigration and all these types of things. And I thought that on the whole, that artists, particularly this group to whom I belong, the Arborealists, had the best idea about what loving a place was about. And so today, we are going to hear from Tim Craven, who was the founder of the Arborealist movement, which is a group of artists that paint trees. Tim has created many exhibitions as the curator of Southampton City Art Gallery. The one that started this whole idea off about trees and conservation was called Under the Greenwood at St Barb Museum and Art Gallery in the New Forest. Along with him today, we have Sandra Higgins, who also is a curator and works out of the West Country, so very close to where you are, to Dartington. And she has been looking again at different artists who are interested on the whole in these kind of activities. The important thing about the talk today, and it is about a sense of place, it's about a place that is very close to both Devon and Somerset. It's on the shoulder of both of them in the West Country, and it's called the Blackdown Hills. And before I hand you over to Tim, who's going to talk to you about both the history and the idea, and then on to Sandra, who is one of the curators, I'd just like to read you a bit from Flaxford. And there's another country I heard of long ago, most dear to them that love her, most great to them that know. And soul by soul and silently her shining bounds increase, and her ways are the ways of gentleness, and all her paths are peace. And that's what we as artists hope for. Thank you very much. Over to Tim.
Right, okay. Thank you very much, Philippa. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm delighted to speak to you about this forthcoming exhibition about art in the Blackdown Hills, which will open at the Thelma Hulbert Gallery in Honiton on the 18th of March next year. And I think it runs into early June. I just see I haven't got the end date, but I see I'm talking at the beginning of June there. This is quite an exciting project. And I just, before I go into how the idea came about and what we're planning to do, the format of the project, I thought I'd set the scene by talking to you about the history of art there. In fact, the working title for my exhibition was Art History in the Blackdown Hills, which I had known about before I sort of came up with this idea. So I'm going to start in 1909. on that day, in that year, Harold Harrison purchased the Applehayes estate in the Blackdown Hills, which is just south of Clayhyden, sort of a little village in the north of the Blackdown Hills, which is the Blackdown Hills, if you don't know it, is located on the Devon-Somerset border above Honiton. It's quite a remote area, and it's just above the A303, which many of you have travelled up and down. And it's an amazing place. And this Applehayes estate he purchased was about 300 acres. It included 4 farms. And he came from quite a sort of prosperous landed family who lived near Bath. And he and his brother were sent out earlier when he was a young man out to Argentina, to their ranch out there. And I guess during the late sort of winter evenings, when there wasn't much to do, he started to draw and paint. And he obviously had some talent there, and he enjoyed it so much. He came back to England and wanted to join and go to art college. And he, luckily for him, he was able to get a place at the Slade School of Art. That's just the place to be. And he just so happened to nick in with a year group of one of the most astonishing, talented group of young artists who would change the face of British art, who he befriended. When he bought this estate, he converted some of his barns into artist studios, and he asked all his artist mates to come and stay with him and make some art. And such amazingly famous artists such as Stanley Spencer, when young Stanley Spencer went the first time he'd left home from his home in Berkshire. And so it was a revelation for him. William Roberts went, the former vorticist, and also Mark Gertler. But they just went for holidays. But he also invited his great friend Spencer Gore, who went down at least 3 times. And then Charles Ginner and Robert Bevan also followed in 1912. This was the 3rd visit for Spencer in 1912. And they settled down there for a number of weeks. And they loved the landscape. And they made these post-impressionist avant-garde works of the landscape in response, to the beauties that they saw all around them. And they were members by this time of the Camden Town Group, which you may have heard of. It's been cited as the foundation stone of British modern art. It's one of 3, possibly 4 manifestations of the British post-impressionist movement. The others being the Bloomsbury Group, the Vorticist Group, who are sort of linked to Braque and Picasso, and the Cubists, the abstract section, and also possibly the Scottish colourists who come around a bit later. The Camden Town Group were 16 artists, professional artists, most of them young, many of them been to the Slade School of Art. And their sort of mentor, their leader, the leading light, prime mover, was Walter Sickert. Now, he had been born in 1860, son of a Danish artist born in Munich, who was cosmopolitan. He was known by this time as the enfant terrible of British art. He already had an established reputation as an avant-garde artist. He had been a pupil of Whistler, and Whistler took him to Paris, where he met all the Impressionists. He became especially befriended with Edgar Degas, who was his main source of influence until Degas' death in 1917. And he was brought back. He was living in exile for a number of years. His marriage broke down, and he was fed up with the apathy of Institute of British Art, went to Dieppe to paint the town's architect, was brought back by a chance meeting with Spencer Gores on a painting holiday to come back and lead the new avant-garde in London. And he's in 1907, in 1905 he came back. In 1907 he formed this sort of informal group around him known as the Fitzroy Street Group, They rented a studio in Fitzroy Street Group, and they invited patrons and artists on Saturday afternoons to have tea and to talk about art and sell their work. And after Roger Fry's famous or infamous, notorious exhibition in 1910 called Manet and the Post-Impressionists, when for the first time Londoners saw Post-Impressionists in great numbers, work by Van Gogh, Gauguin, Matisse, and Cézanne. They were horrified. The art establishment, the Royal Academy, the New Art Club, the press and the public were horrified and denigrated it. And then all these young artists were shut out from showing at the Royal Academy and the New Art Club. So they formed their own exhibiting society, which became known as the Camden Town Group, which is where many of them settled. But it only had, it was formed in 1911. It only had 3 exhibitions, but it had huge impact across the fortunes of the British modern art movement. One in 1911, 2 in 1912, and at the Carfax Gallery. And Arthur Clifton there said, well, they've all been financial flops. I'm not doing any more. That's it. You've had it after that. So they then approached William Marchant at the Goupil Gallery, which is a much larger premises. And he said, well, I don't like the word Camden Town because it was linked by this time to some notorious murders that have been there. So he says, not good for business. But you've got to change your name and you need more artists. The Camden Town group had shut out women because at this time there were very few professionals. They didn't want it watered down by amateurs. But they changed their name in 1913 to the London Group, and which is still going today. And Philippa, you've just heard from, as a past president. I was fortunate enough to be elected as a member in 2015. The golden hour, the golden time was during the First World War, and it's sort of been downhill ever since. But most of the most famous British progressive artists have either showed with the London Group in the preceding decades or have been members. So it's got an amazing legacy. So this is the standing of these young artists as they come to the Camden Down Hills. Now, the Blackdown Hills. Now, when the Arborealist showed in 2020, the only real show we had in that, there were lots of online shows, which were very ephemeral, but we had the only real show was at the Somerset Museum in Taunton, and it was the summit of a 2-year art project in partnership with Exmoor and Dartmoor National Park authorities, where the arborists had gone out into these places and painted and made works and prints, drawings and so on of certain sites selected on the moors by the National Park authorities. They had the expertise. I think there were 6 sites on each, and this exhibition was then presented at the Somerset Museum in September of 2020. And I went down there. It's a great place. And I saw in the shop a catalogue of an exhibition that they'd held in 2017 of the Blackdown Hill artists. It was called A Fragile Landscape. And I knew about the show. This is when I was still working at Southampton City Art Gallery, but I never got to see it. So I grabbed this catalogue, the very few left at this time, bought it, and was eagerly reading it. My wife was driving home. And on the way home from Somerset back to Hampshire that very day, the idea for this show came into my head straight away, because everything for me is an exhibition. And I thought, if we go back to some of these sites and reinterpret them with contemporary artists, it'll be a then and now show, because the Blackdown Hills are quite remote. They haven't changed very much because it's quite inaccessible. There's lots of little hamlets and villages, lots of winding little lanes. So much of the landscape looks exactly the same, or very nearly the same as it did during the 1912 to 1920. An extraordinary stroke of luck. And I thought, if we go back to the same sites with artists, then we can look at what's changed. What has changed? The art has changed. The ecology has changed. Agriculture and land management's changed. Social norms, the way we live our life now has changed. And if we look at all those different aspects, and then that'll be a fascinating insight into how art can interpret changes in landscape. I've always worked with my exhibitions with promotional partners. That's local expertise, local knowledge, and marketing machines and their audience. And I thought, for this one, we'll go to Blackdown Hills Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Organisation. I've worked similarly with the Wye Valley AONB, to great benefit for both organisations. So we went to see them, and they've been very kind to come on board, and we've looked at some of their agenda items too. So they're giving us local access, local knowledge. They'll write up the interpretation of these sites. Then the next thing was to get the venue. The best venue close by was the Thelma Hubbard Gallery, where I worked before last year, luckily with the London Group, and I know the director, Ruth Gooding, very well, and she said, yes, that's a good fit for us. It's all about timing with shows, and we were able to program this show for next March, which is very exciting. So the next thing I wanted to do was I always love collaborating when I'm curating shows. So I first talked to Fiona McIntyre, who was going to talk to us today. Hopefully she can get back on. And she's a great friend, lives not very far away in Cirencester. I said, would you like to work on this with me? And she said, yes. And also, how about getting Sandra Higgins in, a very experienced, knowledgeable curator, independent curator, and she would add huge weight and expertise into our project. And luckily Sandra came on board, so the three of us work on the show. The great thing about Fiona is that she's an amazing artist, amazing colorist, is that she's the great granddaughter of Malcolm Drummond, who was a member of the Camden Town Group. So there's an amazing link. So having these links as well through art history, through family, and these organizations, with Philippa Beale being ex-London Group, I'm London Group, Fiona has Camden Town Group links. It all sort of adds interest to our project. So the next we got together and we talked about the sites we could go to, and we chose 12 after a lot of debate. And the next thing to bring on board was I had Southampton, because Southampton has one of the best collections of Camden Town Group works in the country, if not the world. And I'd done various Camden Group exhibitions in my time there. And in 2008, I'd worked with Robert Bevan's great grandson, Patrick Beattie. So I knew him very well, and I knew that a lot of the works of these Blackdown Hills were in the family. So I'd get him on board as well. We'd actually have the works on loan from the family alongside our new works. And our new works would be a curated show in that we'd select 3 artists for each of these 12 sites. And there would be a diverse approach, scale, medium, philosophy, style, and that would add interest and a sort of holistic view of what these sites mean. And the brief was quite simple. It was go to these sites, have a look around. It doesn't have to be the same composition, but we'd like the work to carry the same title, but it's your interpretation. So alongside the text given us by the ONB, we'll have a sort of holistic view of how the site has changed or not, what interests local artists today as to the post-impressionists. So that's the show. Now I'm going to show you some images just to finish off.
Tim, can I just say that Fiona has arrived? So
great. So I'll shut up. Shall I?
Time. Yeah.
Well, I'll just show you these images. So if I share screen, right. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
you can all see that. So that is that's Robert Bevan of Hart's Farm in the Bolham Valley. And I went down to just finish off the minutes. I went down with Patrick Beattie I met him in the Blackdown Hills. He knows the area quite well. He goes for holidays every year. And we came to this site. We saw that site. We saw the field with that tree. And I stood next to him when he said, "That's the place where his great grandfather did this painting." It sent a shiver down my spine. Can you imagine? It was
Tim,
amazing.
can you start the slideshow so we can see it better?
Have you not seen that? Oh, so if I start.
There you go.
Can you not see that?
No, that's better.
So that's the so that's one of our sites, haymaking in the Blackdown Hills. That is another site. This is Bevan's one great tree painting. It's he's looking at Cubist influences here, so it could be anywhere really. So we know it's near Luppet, so we've given our 3 artists a sort of vague idea where it might be. This is work by his great grandmother, Sofonisba Dukowska, and it was a Polish artist. This is Dumpton Hill, which you can see from Honiton, so it's local to where we're going to show. So that's one of our sites. It's now a National Trust place. And Luppet Post Office, which she also painted, which is now a private house. That's another of our sites. So that gives you an idea of where we're coming from. Okay, I think I'll stop there, Richard. Is that okay?
Yes,
Hello?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tim.
So has anybody got any questions? You said I could answer a question.
I think we've got time for one question. Anyone would like to ask one? Tim, I'm going to stop your screen share because I can't see the chat at the moment.
That's fine.
Would anyone like to come in with a question for Tim or a comment? We do have comments in the chat, but if no one wants to come in straight away, I'm going to pass this back to Philippa just to introduce our next guest.
So I'm now very pleased to introduce Sandra Higgins, who I say runs her art consultancy and curatorship, modern curatorship from the West Country, as I call it. I'm in the southeast, incidentally, in deep southeast in Margate, so I'm as far away from Sandra as could possibly be. And so she is now going to follow up and talk about the exhibition as it will be as the main curator. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Philippa. And hello, everyone. Very, very nice to be here. First, I want to thank the Thelma Holbert Gallery. And thank you, Tim, for asking me to join and come along as co-curator. And of course, Fiona, who'll be speaking later. You'll see in back of me one of Fiona's paintings, actually, because I represent Fiona. I have an online gallery because I also am a dealer as well as a curator. We talked a little bit about links, and I think I'm very fortunate that my link is with Dartington Institute. And I know that Richard has his meetings with his organization at Dartington. And ironically, I came over to this country after I'd been in America. I'm based in Chicago, born in Chicago. And I worked in the park movement there because I was very enamored of the work of Frederick Law Olmsted, who was the designer of Central Park. And I grew up in Riverside, which is just outside of Chicago. It was a village designed by Olmsted. And then I later moved on to New York, where I was working with the National Association for Olmsted Parks, when Michael Dower, the research director of Dartington, met me in London. I was on a trip, actually, a holiday. And he said to me, will you work with Dartington? We want to do we want to canvas the urban open spaces in the US and in the UK. And I said, Michael, I'm not a horticulturalist. I trained as a printmaker. I trained as an artist. Yes, I have a love of nature and all things green, to make a joke, actually. And he said, that's fine. He said, because Olmsted wrote in his works, he said, I paint with nature. And that's really how I took up the research that I did from 1981 to 1984, or 82, actually. And then we had the conference at the University of Liverpool, which we called Green Towns and Cities, UK, USA. We had, I think over 300 delegates who came to see how we could preserve at that time the urban green spaces. I then launched a campaign nationally called Think Green. I worked with people like David Bellamy, and I ran with Chris Akabusi, if that's my great claim to fame, in a country park, I think in Southampton. I'm not quite sure if I can remember. But anyway, and now the other link, of course, is I'm in Bath, one of the most beautiful cities, I think, in the UK. A national heritage site, or international heritage site, actually. And I live in a place called Englishcombe, and I'm surrounded by the most beautiful landscape that one can possibly imagine. So when the pandemic came along, and here I was looking out the window at this beautiful landscape, I decided to invite a group of artists, just as I have now as co-curator, to come and visit me in Englishcombe and look out at this beautiful landscape. And it took about 2 years, but we then mounted an exhibition called Shades of Green. And also similarly, I had no remit. I gave the artists no remit other than to come here. They had to come, they had to visit physically, and they had to then go away and create works based on how they responded to the landscape, not on anything I was telling them to do, but how they responded. And so it's a great joy, actually, that when Tim asked me to do basically the same thing, which was to invite a group of very talented artists. And I must say thank you, because they've all been very, very responsive and working very hard to go down and visit the sites, which they have to. And we've only given them an ordnance survey number. So sometimes it was quite an adventure for them to find where the sites were. And of course, because it had changed significantly in the past, in some cases, a bit difficult to match the original, which Tim has shown you. I'm afraid that I can't show you all the artists. It's on the website if you wanted to see the 12 artists that I've chosen. I think Tim has used some of the images that I'm going to be talking about, but I'd at least like to name them all. The artists that I chose or facilitate or engaged in this project were Belinda Crozier, who's a very realistic artist, Day Bowman, who's an abstract painter, David Walsh, who I would call a contemporary impressionist, David Ferry, who has a very surreal quality to his photo montages, Max Milligan, who is an extremely well-known photographer of in Iceland and Scotland, landscapes, dramatic landscapes, Brian Usher, who again is a dear friend from the Chelsea Arts Club, and also has photographed the hillsides and the lands near Bath. John Ball, who's a hyper-realist, so I'm very eager to see what he's going to do. He did some amazing things for Shades of Green. Marguerite Horner. Marguerite Horner's work is very, very sublime. She works in the monochrome, very sensitive, very touching works. Narby Price. I suppose Narby, I don't think he's listening to this. I hope he doesn't mind if I probably miscategorize him. I would say a photorealist, his paintings are. I met him through Jay Bowman when he was in a landscape show at Messums, actually. And I think he likes to look at the history of the place and then take a different kind of tweak it a little bit so that it's a surprise to everyone. Maxine Foster, who's a printmaker and uses many of the detritus found in nature in her works for her inspiration. Luke Walker, who's a founding member of the Wilderness Art Collective, and he engages in walks in the landscape, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and looks at ways to preserve the landscape. And finally, Ruth Piper, whose works are really magic. They're mysterious landscapes, very, very mystic and very inviting. Now, I'd like to tell you about visits. I've accompanied some of the artists on these visits, and maybe we'll look at 4 of these. And I think that Richard can bring up the image of the work of Marguerite Horner, her typical work. If you can do that, can you do that now, Richard?
Yeah, bear with me a sec, and I'll get that for you. Marguerite, let's see. Yeah. There we are. There's Marguerite.
Okay, great. Now, that's actually part of the Shades of Green exhibition. And Marguerite did the beautiful Asas that I have in my garden. This work is called Tangled. And a number of years ago, she began working in only the monochrome, and the works are absolutely extraordinarily beautiful. Her site was Hart's Farm. I don't think that Tim showed that one, but it's a lithograph, actually. She was basing her work on a lithograph done by Robert Bevan. And we found the site with beautiful views across the valley. However, it had been turned into a very utilitarian farm. And we try to be very cautious because there was no one there. And Dave Bowman accompanied us on the same day. So we took our business cards and stuck them in the door lest we feel that we were trespassing on their land. But she said she felt mostly the complete silence. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I recognized about the area as well. It's very still. It's lots of trees, very moody. But she said it was also the smell. You know how a smell can elicit responses in us. And she said it reminded me of something far back in my childhood, something which was a place of calm and security. So you think to yourself, well, maybe this is what the Camden Town group were looking for, a place they could rest, a place they could paint, and a place they could commune with nature. But as I said, Day Bowman accompanied us, and she had a very different take on the experience. When Day also exhibited in Shades of Green, she did work that was quite abstract, and it was really looking at the terrain of the land near where I live. And I think she's taken up that same idea in looking at the topography. Once again, the White Barn, Hart's Farm. But she remarked that, and she made a very interesting point. She said that prior to, or rather during, the enclosure, I hope this is right, somebody can correct me, between 1750 and 1820, this is when the land was purchased by the wealthy landowners. And in fact, the villagers could no longer use these lands, and they left the villages, moved to the cities. And so the bucolic land that you see right now was really created because of the enclosure of the fields. So in some cases, paradoxically, she said, is this paradise lost or paradise found? So, that is something to think about. But nonetheless, it is today this patchwork quilt of beautiful undulating hillsides and beautiful views across the valley. On another sunny day, I went with the artist Ruth Piper. And Ruth, I don't know if you have her work. Do you have her work, Richard? We didn't show days either, I'm sorry. There's days. There's
Ruth.
And there's Ruth's. So you can see what I mean about Ruth's work. Very mysterious in this kind of journey into the undergrowth in the painting. We had a wonderful time because she was assigned to Stanislawa's work. I'm not even going to try the last name. Sorry, Tim will say it for you. In the vicinity of Woodhays Farm. So we climbed to the top of the Dumpton, what a name, eh? Hill, and we could look out at the valley towards Luppet beyond, and we found the place almost exactly, we felt, that she may have stood or been in a house when she was painting. Unfortunately, where we thought the residence was, there's a new building going up. But it was very exciting that we could trace across the landscape all of the trees and see the view that she probably had herself. And it was very eerie because Ruth said to me, I feel like I'm standing in the footsteps where she may have painted. So that was a very exciting trip. And Narby Price, bless him, lives the other side of the country. And here we go. There we go. And he at first said, no, he didn't want to participate. And then when he saw the list of artists, which I'm so pleased they've all accepted, distinguished artists, he said, yes, I would. So he made a jaunt down there, all the way down from the north, I think in Newcastle. And his site was the Luppet Post Office. Now, I think Tim did show you that. And he said when he got to Honiton, he stayed in a hotel overnight in Honiton, and then he walked to the post office. And he said he had to, there are an odd bit of bush dashing vehicles on the road. But when he finally got there, it was basically unchanged, except perhaps the tarmac going across the main road, which was visible. He said, but the place, the post office, was very, very clear. And it was very easy for him to locate his site. But, he said, there was no one there. So he, too, had this very eerie feeling that, he was walking in the footsteps of the past and no one observing him at all. I mentioned Luke Walker before, and Luke has a very appropriate name. This is a set of works that I'm going to be showing soon on my website, and these are databases. And Luke is, in fact, a walker, and he does a series of special walks. He went down to the gallery, met the director, Ruth Gooding, and did a walk from Honiton up to his site. And he was looking at Ginner's landscape apple haze. And he said he couldn't believe it when he reached the house because the mature trees, even though they'd overgrown and there were lots of hedges, it corresponded so closely to what Ginner had painted 110 years ago that he began to think himself how little everything had changed. And then finally, Maxine Foster, there's her work, The Printmaker, yeah. And Maxine went beyond the call of duty. You can maybe see in my social media She had a friend who has a light single wing plane, and she was able to go up and take a flying view, a bird's eye view of the plantation by Robert Bevan, or at least the area, which is, let's see, what is that near? So Tim can tell us better. Anyways, the view from above, the bird's eye view, the rolling hills, the patchwork fields, and the trees in this autumnal scene are just breathtaking. So I hope you'll be able to see that on my website. She said that there was such excitement and anticipation in the air, because there was a sense, once again, that she was very close to Bevan's inspiration. Now, I wish I could have shown you all the other artists. I think what has happened is that these artists, I hope it has happened, I've tried to let them, they're on a WhatsApp group and they are interacting with one another, kind of a new Camden Town group. And I think they're enjoying it very much, and they're inspired and excited. But as Tim said earlier, because you can see the diversity of the artists that I've chosen intentionally, I think it will be a very new vision, as the title says, Paradise Found New Visions. And I think it will be very exciting. I can't wait to see how the exhibition is hung. Maybe Tim has some ideas whether or not we have the original and then we have the three, because there are 36 artists' interpretations, but it should be very exciting. Luke Walker is going to be he's going to be taking a walk with visitors around from the gallery on the 13th of May, and I'm going to be using what I've done today as the basis for a documentary, so there'll be more information about all the artists and more views and more insights into these wonderful adventures that they were able to experience while putting together the show. And thanks ever so much.
So thank you very much, Sandra. I wondered if I could ask Tim if any local artists had been invited to participate, people living in the West Country. I know more artists have been invited, because I know that both myself and Paul Finn have been invited and been down to look at the site. So I wondered if you could enlighten us on other people besides Fiona, because Fiona is local.
Well, the idea, thanks, Philip. The idea was that each of us three would come up with a list of, to be equitable, 12 artists each, and then I wanted art. See, the art has changed. I wanted to have art that wasn't around in the 1910s. Sandra's mentioned photorealism, for instance. So we wanted a diverse approach. So it was about getting a group of artists who were very disparate in how they approached the subject and what they produce. There are some West Country artists. I mean, Paul Newman's not far away. I have come across some since who are even closer, and had I started again, I might have included them. There's lots of very good artists about all over the place. And that's how we approach it. And then we had quite a time discussing how we'd allocate the artists to each site, and we had to sort of rearrange things. As some artists said, I don't want to do that one, or do some readjustment. So it was great fun, but that was part of the deal, really. So there are one or two artists down the West Country, but I don't think there's actually any living on the Blackdown Hills. But having said that, the AONB wanted the local art group to be involved. So they're actually going to be doing something alongside us, but having their own show in the hills. And I'm delighted that it's happening, because I want to be inclusive about this sort of thing.
Because I've already told the people who are listening or joining us today that the arborealists, and because there are so many arborealists in this group, always invite people to join them in their exhibitions. Okay, well, I'd now like to pass on, because time is pressing on, to Fiona McIntyre, who I'm so pleased can join us. And she is one of the participating artists. She's also, hello, Fiona's daughter, nice to see you. Also represented by Sandra Higgins. Fiona and I were both founder members of the Arborealists, and so have known each other since 2013 and have exhibited in very many exhibitions together. I know whatever that she will talk to us about, because not only is she part of this forthcoming exhibition about the Blackdown Hills, and as I was indicating about the earth itself, but she also uses the earth when she's painting. But anyway, over to Fiona.
Okay, thank you very much, Philippa. I wanted to thank you, Philippa, very much, but also Richard Povell for inviting me. And also to Tim and Sandra. So I know I'm not meant to be talking about the Blackdown Hills, but I just wanted to very briefly mention the artist that I'm working with for the Blackdown Hills, so they get a mention. And that's Stella Carr, Michael Porter, Michelle Dovey, Abby Creamer, Frank Kreber, Will Vaughan, Wendy Rhodes, Dan McCarthy, Kate Measham, Farah Faruqi, and Ange Mullen-Bryan. So a fantastic group of artists. And I'm sorry I can't talk about them, but perhaps another time. That would be really good. So I'm going to move on to Sacred Earth. So this is it's a presentation on my current project, which covers several themes of natural materials, deep time, environmental issues, and awakened memory. So the exhibition is going to be entitled Sacred Earth, Spirits in the Land. And it's an exhibition due to come to fruition in 2024. I've put in an application to museums. I've put in a funding application as well. And I'm also thrilled to bits that the wonderful sculptor Peter Randall Page has agreed to contribute some of his sculptures and works on paper, because there's very much a synergy between what we do. And I went down to his studio just a week ago, which is just outside Exeter, to discuss the project. And he was totally in, which is really great. So his work explores symbolism and deep time. He has a fascination for pyramids and obelisks, ziggurats and menhir, the Parthenon, the Sphinx, the Elgin marbles and Stonehenge, the most ancient traces that us humans were here and doing something with our minds and hands. So Sacred Earth, Spirits in the Land began, in my mind, in 1993 as a project inspired by three distinct fragile landscapes: Iceland, Spain, Scotland. And these are places where I lived and studied and developed as an artist. And they've all had a profound impact on my psyche. Peter has also visited two of these landscapes to source stone, particularly granite, of which there are very many types. And he's now planning to visit Iceland for the first time. And very excitingly, he's going to have a go at casting molten lava. So my journey began in Scotland as a child, later as a student at Edinburgh College of Art, followed by Sweden, where I was resident for 7 years, making regular forays to Iceland, and then on to Spain to do an MA. In 1993, I finally returned to the UK and began to process the experience of having lived in these diverse locations in the form of a poem. And each verse was translated into languages which, through clearly hundreds of years, have evolved in close proximity to the natural world. I'm fascinated by how language and myths spring out of physical landscape in the form of creation myths. Now, I did want to show a film, but I'm not sure there's going to be time, really. But I'll give you the link at the end of this, because that's sort of the touchstone of the whole project. And you can also hear the poem being read in those different languages, which is really, really interesting, because you basically not being able to understand them, you hear them as abstract sounds. And there really is a profound link or synergy with the physicality of the landscape. So it would be nice if you could experience that. So Iceland is rich in folklore of trolls turning to stone, giant worms inhabiting lakes, and half human, half gods falling to their deaths and forming gorges and pillars in the land. Scotland also shares similar stories of powerful goddesses associated with creation of mountains, rivers, and lakes, and the yearly cycles of winter and fertility. Spain has legends of spirits with supernatural powers that inhabit Galicia, dwelling in forests, rivers, and on sandy beaches. So again, that's another connection. There are a lot of connections between these three places, which is very, very interesting. So that includes language through Gaelic. Galicia, prior to the Romans turning up, they were speaking Gaelic, a form of Gaelic. And then, of course, there's a lot of connection with the ancient Norse, the Scandinavians, bringing some of their language to Galicia as well as Scotland, and so on and so forth. There's also a lot of shared geology. I want to start by showing you, let's see, I'm not sure how we're going to do this. I'm going to show you some slides.
You can share your screen, Fiona.
Yeah, my daughter's being my technician.
Okay.
This is Zena, my daughter, who's much better at using this than me.
There we are, with her.
Can you see it?
Yes,
okay, that's really great. Okay. So, is that working? Yeah, brilliant. Right, do you want to move it on to the next one? That's right. So, sorry. So this is Iceland at the top, and you've got Galicia, northern Spain at the bottom, so you can see pools of boiling. Is there any way of getting rid of these, Ina?
Yeah, no, they can't.
Oh, okay. Can you move it across? Yeah. You can't get rid of it.
No.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so you've got, they're called kveri, they're pools of boiling mud, hot springs and fumaroles emitting sulfuric gas. I went out to Iceland in October, so I took a lot of footage, I took loads of photographs, and I did a lot of drawing, all of which you'll see a bit later. And I also went out, just before lockdown, I went out to Galicia and did the same thing. You can see the footage in the film when I give you the link, so you can watch that later in your own time. What's interesting about these three places is the connection, okay? So as I mentioned before, that's through geology of granite specifically, which they all share, mountains, obviously, changeable weather, language, as I've already mentioned, creation myths, and of course, Neolithic art. Although that is not found in Iceland, because Iceland is actually so volcanic, nothing really lasts very long, and humans only inhabited Iceland from around 900, so there would be no Neolithic remnants there, but they have other things instead. And their ancient monuments really are the ancient remnants of volcanic eruptions. There are also fragile ecosystems, and this trinity of landscapes represent key environmental concerns of glacial melting, deforestation, and desertification. And through the personal experience of the artist, they can also be seen within a much bigger picture affecting all of us. So, do you want to go? Yeah, that's Scotland. So this is Scotland. So this is Aberdeenshire. So I've spent a lot of time on both sides of both coasts of Scotland, should I say, because I've got family all around Scotland. And there are an awful lot of stone circles and burial sites in Aberdeenshire. So I went and visited quite a few of them. Do you want to move on to the next one, Dan? So last October, I travelled back to Iceland and I visited the erupting volcano at Fagradalsfjall, where I collected lava to make into pigment. It was the first time I had seen a live volcano, and I've been waiting for a very long time because I had been going out there a lot over the years. So it really was an amazing experience, and it had calmed down significantly, but nevertheless I was treated to a rather gentle display of glistening rivulets of molten lava meandering down the side of the volcano. So this is the lava that I collected, and I bashed it up. It was sort of like smashing up glass, so it wasn't quite as tough as I thought it might be. And I turned it into pigment, which I levigated, which means you're floating it out in water, taking off the finer particles, which you use to make into the pigment. And then I mixed it. Actually, in this case, I turned it into watercolor paint, so using things like gum arabic and various other things that you add into it. And I made the paints that I then used to work with once I was in Iceland. Do you want to move on to the next one? So this is an inspiration for a series of works on panel using silver leaf. So that's me on the left, representing the meandering shapes that I could see in water, glaciers, molten lava, etc. And Peter is also contributing works on paper. So this is a great example. This is a silkscreen print, which is a sort of mirror image of fractal-like patterns in nature and sort of oddly reminiscent of some of the lava rivulets that I was looking at. So I visited the fourth largest glacier in Iceland, which is on the south coast. It's called Mýrdalsjökull. And I made a series of drawings sitting outside, as you can see, after an extremely long walk. It took about 2 hours to get to this site. I was using the paints that you saw in that palette that I've made, using mineral pigments of malachite, Icelandic ochres, Vivianite, which is a type of blue, a sort of ochre-y, sort of dusty greyish blue, really. Due to the necessity of reaching the glacier by foot and the changeability of Icelandic weather, I thought out of the box and I took a very small drawing board and I folded my paper to fit the drawing board. And so I found it to be quite a useful method. I've done this before in the past. I did it for a project with Philippa Beale, which is a project on London, and where I went up to the top of the Wren Tower, and it was such a tight fit that I would never get a big drawing board up there. So that's when I came up with the idea of folding the paper. And it's quite an interesting thing to do, particularly with this Sacred Earth project, because it sort of reminds me of a map or a grid, and also enables the development of work on a much larger scale later on in the studio. So this is the next slide. So this, as you can see, so this greenish color on the right is malachite, which comes from copper. So it can be found occurring with something called azurite, which is a darker blue, not to be confused with lapis lazuli. So it's a mineral, but it's also found in other things that can be manufactured artificially with copper and using things like vinegar and salt, which I've attempted to make myself and failed dismally. But you build it up over a long time, and then you scrape it off. So it's quite a laborious way to make it. But
Fiona, sorry to interrupt. We have a couple of minutes left.
Oh, have you? I know, that's a pity. Right, okay. So I'll crack on. So this is the glacier that I was drawing. This is Myrdalsjökull, okay. And there's so much to say. It's a pity I can't really tell you everything that I wanted to say. But
we're happy to share additional images and information on the web page.
Yeah. So anyway, do you want to move on quickly? So I'm just going to quickly, these are works on gesso panel. Keep going, Zena. That's it. So now we're into Spain. This is Spain. This is Galicia. And I went to visit the petroglyphs at a place called Campo Lamiro. They're 4,000 years old. Okay, next, keep going, Z. And these are some of the works that I produced. These are small oils on paper using these natural pigments. And the next one, these are natural ochres. This is a rubbing that I did from one of the petroglyphs. And I also walked up into a place in Festine, 2-hour walk all the way up to the top, and with an incredible view with more petroglyphs. Then we come to Scotland. So this is a place called Coffeemere in Aberdeenshire. It's a woodland, and it's got an ancient stone circle right in the middle of it. And these are some of the drawings that I produced using dry pigments that I rubbed into paper. I spent a lot of time in there. I just wanted to drop in these are etchings that I've produced recently, about to be shown in London in the Discerning Eye, because these are relating to the myths that I was talking about. So I've become very fascinated by ancient myths and how they specifically relate to the creation of landscape, their creation myths. So these are more works from Coffeemere. Okay, and then these are from the Claver Cairns, which is another site, and also Tomniberi, another site, using pigments, mold, in oil paint on panel. Okay, and then these are some beautiful sculptures in granite by Peter, which gives you an idea of what he's going to be producing. And then we come to some of the more natural materials.
I'm going to have to wrap up now.
That's it.
Fiona. This is definitely an exhibition worth seeing.
There we are. So there was a lot more to say, but obviously I haven't had the time. But I hope that gives you an idea.
Obviously an exhibition well worth seeing. Thank you thank you to Sandra, to Tim, and to Fiona for discussing the Blackdown Hills, and Fiona, her 3 countries and 3 sites, and the way that she actually works with the earth. A great event, I think, towards the idea of a sense of place, which, as I explained at the beginning, has been running now for 3 years. I have put a message up about 2 more exhibitions that concern a sense of place, which are taking place in November, December and January consecutively. I won't talk about them now, but thank everybody for being with us. Hope that if you're tramping around Somerset, North Devon area next year, that you manage to get to see today's sense of place, the Blackdown Hills. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Richard. And thank you, Dartington Hall, for having us.
Thank you to everyone for a fantastic hour. As always, the hour gets squeezed. But it was wonderful. I will collect information from everyone that isn't already on the webpage And then when we add the video from this session early next week, we'll make sure that, information about exhibitions and all of that is included so that you can hopefully have a chance to see some of this work up close, particularly the gorgeous Thelma Holbert Gallery, which is always worth a visit. So thank you, everyone, very much indeed. And in December, we are having a First Friday featuring the work of members of art.earth. And we probably will not have one in January because it's too close to everyone being exhausted from Christmas. But we'll see you next the first Friday of December. Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.